It began with a soundless flash across the stars. Out in the cold emptiness beyond the known borders of the galaxy, an ancient signal awoke something that had been sleeping for longer than anyone could remember. Deep inside a forgotten corner of space, a massive structure drifted, half buried in cosmic dust, half lit by distant starlight. It was not a planet or a station. It was a warship, black and silent, older than any civilization that ruled the galaxy now. For countless years it had waited, its engines dead and its systems quiet, until that moment when its sensors caught the faint pulse of energy, the same kind that once belonged to humanity. The Galactic Council had always believed humans were gone. Their records said Earth was destroyed in the chaos of the Great Collapse, thousands of years ago. The species had burned themselves out in war, leaving only ruins behind. The Council had long used that story as a warning to others. Power without unity leads to extinction. But the story was not completely true. Some had whispered for centuries that a few humans had escaped. They said survivors had fled on hidden ships, disappearing into the dark, carrying with them the memories of everything lost. The Council dismissed those stories as myths, until now. When the strange signal appeared, Council sensors traced it to a region known as the Empty Veil, a dead zone filled with radiation storms and wreckage from forgotten wars. No one ever went there, but something was moving in that darkness. The Council's science division sent drones to investigate. The drones never returned. A second probe went out. It sent only 3 seconds of footage before the signal vanished again. In that brief moment they saw it, a shape too massive to be a normal vessel, slowly coming to life, glowing faintly like a heartbeat returning after endless silence. The Council leaders gathered in their great chamber, each representative of their many worlds arguing in panic. Some thought it was a lost warship from the old human confederation. Others believed it was a trick, perhaps built by pirates or a rival empire. The more cautious among them wanted to wait and watch, but the military officers wanted to act fast. The unknown had always been a threat, and the Council could not risk letting something that powerful drift freely through space. So they sent a scout team, small, fast ships armed with the best sensors. They were told to observe, not to engage. As they approached the coordinates, the crews inside joked nervously. They said they didn't believe in ghost stories. But when the shadow of the massive vessel appeared before them, all laughter stopped. It stretched across the void like a mountain of metal, silent and still, its hull covered in strange patterns that glowed faintly as the scouts drew near. They tried to send a message, no answer. They tried again, this time in dozens of languages. Still nothing. Then one of the scouts reported movement, a faint pulse of blue light spreading across the ship's surface like veins awakening. The commander ordered a retreat, but it was too late. All at once, their screens went black. Every communication link, every sensor feed, every trace of data cut off instantly. Back at the Council's command center, the technicians froze. The scout team had vanished. Not a single distress beacon returned. A few moments later, every communication channel in Council space flickered on. Across thousands of worlds, every display, every transmission, every satellite picked up the same signal. A voice echoed through the static, calm, cold, and unmistakably human. It said only 3 words: "We remember everything." The words sent waves of shock through the Council's ranks. The broadcast lasted just long enough for everyone to hear it before fading away, leaving only silence behind. Panic spread. If humans were alive, then where had they been all these years? And what did they remember? The Council's archives were quickly locked down. Only the highest officials knew the truth, that long ago the Council had been responsible for Earth's destruction. Humanity had grown too ambitious, too unpredictable. They had refused to follow the Council's rules, had begun to develop weapons that even frightened their allies. The Council decided it was safer to erase them. They attacked Earth under the excuse of preventing another galactic war. No one outside the inner circle ever knew what truly happened. Until now, within days, the mysterious ship began moving toward populated systems. Its path was direct and deliberate, as if it knew exactly where it was going. The Council called an emergency meeting. Voices shouted over each other in fear and anger. Some wanted to send peace envoys. Others demanded to destroy the ship before it reached any world. But the Council's military branch had already made its choice. They ordered the fleet's top admiral to prepare a strike force. Their mission: intercept and neutralize the unknown vessel. As warships assembled near the border systems, news of the threat spread among civilians. On different worlds, people gathered in fear, wondering who these humans were and why they had returned. Old legends resurfaced, stories of a proud, emotional, and fierce species that once shaped galaxies with their courage and creativity. Some even admired them. Others saw them as dangerous ghosts who should have stayed gone. Meanwhile, inside the massive human warship, life had already returned. Deep corridors lit up one after another. Engines that hadn't burned in thousands of years hummed again. The ship's AI controlled everything, a quiet, calculating mind that had spent centuries learning, repairing, and remembering. It had been created to protect humanity's last survivors. Over time, those survivors built new generations, teaching their children stories about Earth, about blue skies, oceans, music, and betrayal. For them, the Council wasn't just an enemy. It was the reason their home no longer existed. Now, after countless years of hiding, they were ready. The ship's crew moved with calm precision. They didn't talk about victory or revenge. They only talked about purpose. Their ancestors had left behind a promise that one day humanity would return not to conquer, but to remind the galaxy that they had never truly been erased. The approaching Council fleet numbered in the thousands. Each ship carried weapons capable of burning planets. They believed their power was unmatched. Yet, as they approached the human vessel, some officers felt uneasy. The enemy wasn't moving to attack or defend. It simply drifted forward, silent, like a giant waiting for something. One commander described the feeling as standing before a sleeping god. When the first Council ship scanned the vessel, they couldn't identify its energy core. The readings made no sense. It wasn't powered by any known fuel. It was as if the ship was drawing energy directly from space itself. Their scientists called it impossible. Their soldiers called it terrifying. The admiral ordered a warning shot. A single beam of plasma struck the ship's outer hull and vanished without effect. The human vessel didn't even flinch. Then for the first time it responded. A faint ripple spread across its surface and the stars around it seemed to bend. The Council's sensors went wild, detecting energy levels higher than anything ever recorded. Before anyone could react, a soft pulse of light spread outward, harmless in appearance but powerful enough to disable every nearby system. The entire Council fleet went dark. Ships floated powerless, crews shouting in confusion as controls stopped responding. Inside the human ship, the AI observed quietly. It had not attacked to kill, it had only sent a message: we can end this at any time. The humans inside watched as their screens showed the disabled enemy fleet. Some wanted to strike, to end the ones who had once destroyed their home. But the commander's voice broke the silence. Not yet, they said. They need to understand first. Slowly, the massive warship drifted past the helpless fleet, engines glowing softly in the dark. The Council ships floated behind it, unable to move, unable to comprehend what had just happened. For the first time in centuries, the Galactic Council felt powerless. When power finally returned hours later, the human ship was gone, leaving only silence and confusion. In the following days, rumors filled the galaxy. Some claimed the humans had returned to rebuild their lost world. Others believed they were preparing for something larger, a confrontation that could decide the future of every civilization. But one thing was certain: the Council could no longer pretend that humanity was just a story from the past. The legends were real. The ghosts had come back, and somewhere in the darkness the ancient warship continued its journey, silent, patient, unstoppable. Its destination was unknown, but its purpose was clear. Humanity had survived, and now, the galaxy would remember their name once more. The news spread faster than light. Across thousands of worlds, every government, every colony, and every trading port talked about the same thing. A human warship had appeared. No one knew where it came from, and no one could understand how something so old could be so powerful. The Council tried to control the story, but it was too late. Civilians were already sharing recordings of the mysterious signal. We remember everything. Those words played everywhere, in schools, in marketplaces, and homes. Some people felt fear, others felt curiosity, and a few felt something they couldn't explain, a quiet respect for a species that refused to disappear. Inside the Council's high chamber, tension hung heavy. The representatives of the great species argued day and night. Some wanted to open communication, others demanded full-scale war. They feared what the humans might do next. The last time humanity had held power, it had shaken the entire galaxy. They had been explorers, creators, and fighters all at once, a mix that both inspired and frightened others. Now, after thousands of years of silence, they were back with a warship that could disable a fleet without firing a single shot. The Council's military command refused to wait any longer. They called for their strongest force, the Celestial Guard, a fleet made up of the best ships and crews from across the galaxy. Their technology was unmatched, or so they believed. Each ship carried weapons capable of vaporizing cities. Their shields were powered by energy cores that could withstand anything short of a supernova. The commanders were proud, confident, and eager to prove that the Council was still the strongest power in existence. But not everyone agreed with the plan. There were those who remembered how the Council had once betrayed humanity. They had seen the ancient records, the truth about Earth's fall. The Council's leaders had decided to destroy humanity out of fear, calling it a necessary measure for peace. But deep down, they had known it was not peace they wanted. It was control. And now, centuries later, that old decision was coming back to haunt them. Far beyond the Council's borders, the human warship, Erebus, drifted quietly through the dark. From the outside, it looked dead. No lights, no signals, no visible crew. But inside, it was alive with purpose. Every corridor was filled with soft hums of power returning. The humans on board moved calmly, each knowing their role. They weren't soldiers in the traditional sense, they were descendants of survivors. Every one of them had grown up hearing stories of Earth, the oceans that sparkled under sunlight, the cities that touched the sky, the songs and laughter of people who believed in hope. For them, this mission wasn't about revenge. It was about justice and remembrance. In the command chamber of the ship, a large display showed the Council's approaching fleet. Thousands of dots, each one a warship, were moving fast. The humans had expected this. They knew the Council would never try peace first. The AI that controlled Erebus had already calculated every possible outcome. It could predict the enemy's actions before they even made them. Yet it did not speak of attack or destruction. It waited for the humans to decide. That was part of its design. It did not act without human choice. Among the crew, there was no fear. They had trained for generations preparing for this moment. Some worked silently at their stations, checking systems, adjusting shields, and running scans. Others stared quietly out the large viewing windows, watching the distant lights of the enemy fleet. For many, it was their first time seeing another civilization's ships up close. They had lived their entire lives in isolation, hidden among dead stars. And now the galaxy was looking back at them. A young officer whispered softly, "They don't know who we are." Another replied, "They will soon." The words weren't said with pride, but with quiet determination. The crew had been taught humility, patience, and unity, the very things their ancestors had failed to protect. They had learned from the past. That was why, even as the Council's armada approached, no one panicked. They had one rule: never strike first unless there is no other way. The Council's fleet moved into position. From the flagship, the commander sent out a broad transmission. His voice echoed across the stars, calm but filled with arrogance. "Unknown vessel, this is the Galactic Council. You are entering restricted space. Power down your engines and prepare to be escorted for questioning. Failure to comply will be seen as an act of war." There was no reply. Minutes passed. The commander grew restless. He repeated the order, his tone sharper now. Still nothing. The ship didn't slow. It didn't turn. It just kept drifting silently forward. Finally, the commander gave the signal. "Fire a warning shot." A single beam of energy shot across space and struck the human ship's hull. It should have left a mark. It didn't. The energy simply vanished, absorbed like a drop of water into sand. The crew of the Council's flagship stared at their screens in disbelief. No known material could absorb that much power without damage. Before they could react, something changed. The stars around the human ship began to distort, like ripples on water. A faint light spread across its hull, outlining strange markings, symbols from a language long forgotten. Then a calm voice filled every communication channel at once. It was neither robotic nor cold. It sounded human. "Your weapons are useless. Leave now." The commander hesitated. That voice wasn't angry. It was controlled, almost regretful. But pride took over. "Fire all weapons," he shouted. The sky exploded with color. Thousands of ships unleashed their weapons at once. Beams, missiles, and plasma storms filled the darkness. For several seconds, it looked as if the human ship had disappeared inside a sea of destruction. But when the light faded, it was still there, untouched. The entire fleet froze in shock. Then the Erebus responded, not with weapons, but with a single pulse of energy. It wasn't an explosion. It was like a wave of invisible wind passing through the void. Every ship that it touched went silent. Their weapons powered down. Their engines stopped. Inside systems flickered and died. Crew members tried desperately to reboot their controls, but nothing worked. The human ship had disabled them all in an instant. The calm voice returned. "We warned you." And then it was gone. The Council's commander sat in stunned silence. He had just witnessed the impossible. Thousands of the galaxy's best warships had been shut down by a single human vessel. He couldn't even understand how it was done. His crew whispered among themselves, frightened and lost. What kind of technology could do something like this? And how had humans, supposedly extinct, created it so long ago? Meanwhile, inside Erebus, the humans watched the drifting enemy fleet with quiet sorrow. They had no joy in victory. They knew the Council would not stop here. This was only the beginning. One of the senior officers looked at the others and said softly, "They will come again, stronger next time." The AI responded, "Then we will remind them again." For the next few days, the Council tried to explain the incident. They told the public that it had been a malfunction, not an attack. But their soldiers knew the truth. They had seen the human ship up close. They had heard that voice. Some began to question their leaders, wondering what else had been hidden from them about Earth's past. Whispers started spreading even inside the Council's ranks. Stories of guilt, cover-ups, and betrayal. The humans didn't chase the defeated fleet. They turned away and continued their silent journey deeper into space. But their message had already reached every corner of the galaxy. People talked about the ghost ship from Earth. Children asked their parents who the humans were. Old historians pulled out forgotten files and maps of a blue planet that once shone like a jewel in the darkness. For the first time in 1,000 years, the galaxy remembered the name of Earth. As the Erebus moved through the stars, its crew stood together in silence. They didn't celebrate. They didn't rest. They just watched the endless night outside their windows. They knew more challenges were coming. The Council wouldn't give up easily, but they also knew something far greater. Humanity was no longer a memory. They were alive, and their story was far from over. The AI dimmed the ship's lights and spoke one last line to its crew before entering stealth mode again. "We will show them what it means to be human, not through destruction but through truth." The crew nodded, understanding the weight of those words. Somewhere out there, the Council was preparing for another confrontation, but the humans were ready. They had survived the impossible once before, and they would do it again. And so the human warship disappeared back into the depths of space, leaving behind a galaxy filled with questions and fear. But for the first time in thousands of years, one truth was clear. Humanity had returned, and the universe would never be the same again. The days following the battle were filled with silence and fear across the galaxy. Every news channel, every communication hub, and every star system whispered about the same thing: the mysterious human warship that had defeated the Council's best fleet without even firing a single shot. For many, it was unbelievable. For others, it was terrifying. How could one ship stand against thousands and come out untouched? The Galactic Council tried to calm the situation. They released official reports claiming the incident was a misunderstanding caused by a rogue artificial intelligence. But no one believed it. The soldiers who survived the encounter had seen the truth with their own eyes. They had heard that calm human voice that said, "We warned you." They knew it wasn't a malfunction, it was a message. Humanity was back. In the great cities of the Council's homeworlds, panic began to grow. Some citizens feared the humans would return to take revenge for the past. Others began questioning what really happened to Earth so long ago. Why had the Council destroyed it? What were they hiding? For the first time in centuries, cracks began to appear in the Council's control. Inside the Council's main chamber, the leaders met again. The atmosphere was tense. No one spoke of peace this time. The humiliation from their defeat was too great. One of the senior commanders slammed a metal hand on the table. "We underestimated them once. We won't make that mistake again." Another replied coldly, "You saw what happened. They disabled our entire fleet in seconds. How do you fight something like that? There was no clear answer, but pride would not allow them to appear weak. They decided to rebuild their forces, bigger, stronger, and faster. Billions of credits were poured into new weapons research. Every scientist, every engineer was ordered to find a way to counter the humans' technology. Fear became their motivation. Meanwhile, far away from Council space, the human warship Erebus floated quietly through the stars. Inside, its crew gathered in the main chamber, studying holographic maps of the galaxy. The ship's AI projected detailed images of the Council's activities, their movements, their growing fleets, their energy patterns. The humans watched in silence. They knew the Council would strike again. The question was not if, but when. The crew of the Erebus lived differently than most civilizations. There were no rich or poor among them, no ranks of pride or greed. Every person had a purpose, every voice had value. They were the descendants of those who had survived humanity's fall. They had been raised not only to fight, but also to remember. Generations had grown up inside this ship, learning about Earth, its history, its mistakes, and its beauty. To them, the ship wasn't just a weapon, it was home. Each day was calm and disciplined. They trained together, ate together, and spent time listening to the old recordings from Earth, music, speeches, and sounds of rain. Many of them had never seen a planet before, yet they dreamed of the blue oceans and green forests their ancestors once had. The older generation often told stories about the final days of Earth, how the Council had turned on them, how the skies had burned, and how the survivors had escaped into the dark, carrying their hopes inside great metal ships like this one. Now, after thousands of years, those stories were no longer just history, they were alive again. The AI that guided Erebus spoke softly, its voice filled with quiet awareness. "The Council is preparing another fleet," it said one day. "They will come soon." No one was surprised. They had expected this. One of the senior officers stood up and said, "Then let them come. This time we'll show them who we truly are." The humans didn't speak of revenge. Their anger had long been replaced by patience and purpose. They knew violence alone would change nothing. They needed to reveal the truth that the Council had hidden from the galaxy for thousands of years. It wasn't about destroying the Council. It was about exposing them. To do that, they had to survive the next battle. The AI began calculating the next likely points of attack. Massive holographic images filled the air, showing Council warfleets gathering near strategic systems. The humans studied every detail, every formation. They knew how the Council thought. Their ancestors had once been part of that same structure before the betrayal. Humanity understood fear, and they could sense it in the Council's movements. Fear made the Council predictable. As preparations continued, the Erebus moved silently through space, using stealth systems far beyond anything the Council had ever developed. The ship could bend light, vanish from radar, and hide within gravitational shadows. It was invisible to the galaxy, a ghost drifting between stars. The crew moved with purpose, checking systems, testing new defenses, and improving the ship's shields. One day, as they passed through a nebula filled with glowing blue gas, the youngest members of the crew gathered near the viewing deck. They watched the bright lights outside and whispered about Earth. Some wondered if they would ever return to the place their ancestors called home. But no one truly knew if Earth still existed. It had been destroyed, or at least that's what the old records said. But deep down, many of them believed something might still remain, a piece of the old world waiting to be found. For now, their mission was clear: survive and reveal the truth. Weeks later, the first signs of the Council's movement appeared. Thousands of ships were gathering at the edge of a distant star cluster. The Erebus intercepted their encrypted messages. They were planning another attack, but this time they weren't coming alone. The Council had called in support from allied empires, species that owed them loyalty or feared their power. Together they formed what they called the Unity Fleet. It was the largest gathering of warships in history. When the humans saw the data, no one panicked. The AI simply said, "They believe strength comes from numbers." The lead officer replied, "And we know strength comes from understanding." The humans didn't rush to meet them. They waited. Waiting was their greatest weapon. The Council was impatient. They were proud and desperate to prove their power again. That was what made them weak. Back at the Council's command, the fleet commanders were restless. Some of them had doubts. They remembered what had happened the last time. But orders were orders. They believed that if they attacked with overwhelming numbers, they could finally destroy the human ship before it could react. The plan seemed perfect until it wasn't. While the council prepared, the Erebus was already there, hidden among the stars, watching. Its sensors picked up every movement, every conversation, every test signal from the fleet. The humans didn't need to guess what was coming. They already knew. Inside the ship, calm music played in the background as the crew continued their quiet work. The AI monitored the council's transmissions and stored everything as evidence, proof that the council was planning another war, not peace. One day, the humans would share this with the galaxy, and everyone would see who the real aggressors were. As the fleet drew closer, tension filled the air, but it wasn't fear. It was focus. The humans checked every weapon, every defense, every escape route. They weren't planning to destroy the council's armada. They were planning to survive it while making sure the truth could not be buried again. When the moment finally came, the stars seemed to go silent. Thousands of council ships appeared, glowing with energy, their engines lighting up the darkness. At their center was a colossal flagship, its hull covered in symbols of power. The commanders gave their orders, confident that victory was near. But somewhere, hidden within the shadows of a nearby moon, the Erebus waited, still, patient, and unseen. Its crew sat quietly at their stations, eyes fixed on the displays. The AI's voice broke the silence. "They're here." The lead officer looked around the room. "Remember why we're here," they said softly. "We fight only when there's no other choice." Everyone nodded. Outside, the galaxy held its breath as the greatest armada in history began to move. The council was ready for battle, unaware that the humans had been watching their every step. The storm was coming, and this time both sides knew it wouldn't end easily. The humans didn't want war. But they knew something larger than themselves was at stake. The truth about humanity's past, the lies that shaped the present, and the hope that one day, the galaxy would understand what it really meant to be human. The Erebus remained still, hidden in the dark, waiting for the first move. The crew felt the hum of the engines, the heartbeat of the ship that had carried their ancestors across centuries. They didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but they knew one thing for sure. Whatever happened next, they wouldn't run. Not again. They had come too far, and now the galaxy would finally see that humanity was not just a memory. They were a force, patient, intelligent, and unbroken. The storm was gathering, and the humans were ready to face it. The quiet before the storm was the hardest part. Space was calm, silent, endless. Yet beneath that calm, two powers were preparing for a battle that would be remembered for generations. On one side, the Galactic Council's great fleet, the largest gathering of warships ever seen. On the other, a single human vessel, the Erebus, silent and invisible, hidden among the shadows of a lifeless moon. Inside the Erebus, the crew moved with steady focus. There was no shouting, no panic, just quiet determination. Every person knew their role. They had trained their whole lives for this moment. They were not just defending themselves, they were protecting the memory of an entire species. Generations before them had dreamed of this day, the day humanity would face the same power that once tried to erase them. The AI's calm voice broke the silence. Enemy fleet detected. 3,000 warships approaching at full speed. A soft light glowed across the screens, showing wave after wave of ships closing in. The crew exchanged glances, but no one spoke. Fear existed, yes, but it had no control here. The humans had learned something the Council never understood. True strength was not just in weapons, but in purpose. Far away, inside the Council's flagship, confidence filled the air. The commanders believed victory was certain this time. They had studied the first encounter and convinced themselves that the humans' success had been luck or trickery. Now they had upgraded weapons, reinforced shields, and brought more ships than ever before. They thought numbers would be enough. But numbers could not win a war of minds. The commander of the Council fleet gave the order. "Spread formation. Prepare for engagement." The ships moved like a metal storm across the stars. Energy beams began to charge, glowing brightly against the darkness. Each captain was ready, proud to fight for what they called galactic peace. Yet deep down, many were uneasy. Some still remembered the message from the human ship, the calm warning that had followed their defeat. It echoed in their minds like a ghostly reminder. We warned you. As the Council fleet advanced, the Erebus remained perfectly still. The humans didn't rush. The ship's dark hull blended with the shadows, invisible to every scanner. The crew waited, their hands on controls, eyes locked on their displays. Finally, one voice whispered, "They're in range." The AI responded softly, "We hold position." Seconds turned into minutes. The Council grew impatient. Their sensors showed nothing. "Where is it?" one officer shouted.
"Find that ship!"
Thousands of scanners swept the area, searching for any trace. But the Erebus stayed hidden. The Council ships kept moving, unknowingly walking into the trap the humans had prepared. Suddenly, the stars flickered. A faint energy pulse rippled across the darkness, barely visible, but powerful enough to make the nearest ships tremble. Before anyone could react, the image of the Erebus appeared in front of them, its massive structure glowing faintly with blue light. It had been there all along, watching. The Council commander froze. "All ships fire!" he yelled. In an instant, the sky exploded. Beams of plasma and missiles streaked through space, crashing toward the human vessel. The brightness was blinding, filling the void with chaos. The Erebus disappeared behind a wall of destruction. For a few moments, it seemed like the humans were gone. But when the light faded, the Erebus was still there, untouched. The Council crews stared at their screens in disbelief. Not a single weapon had pierced the ship's defenses. The human vessel stood silently, its outer surface glowing like a shield of light. Then, without warning, a deep vibration ran through space. The Erebus began to move. Its engines roared to life, glowing with a strange golden light that seemed to bend the stars around it. The ship darted forward faster than anything the Council had ever seen. It passed straight through their first line of ships, and as it did, every enemy system it touched began to fail. Engines died, weapons went offline, and alarms screamed across the fleet. Inside the Council's flagship, panic erupted. "Shields failing. We're losing control. Weapons unresponsive." The commanders shouted orders, but nothing worked. The human ship was too fast, too smart. It wasn't just fighting. It was predicting every move before it happened. The Erebus seemed alive, as if it could feel their fear and use it against them. Inside the human warship, the crew worked in complete sync with the AI. It calculated every target, every weakness. But even as they fought, there was no joy in their faces, only sadness. They knew these soldiers weren't the real enemy. The Council's leaders had sent them, just as they had sent armies long ago to destroy Earth. The humans were not fighting for revenge. They were fighting so that no one could erase them again. The AI's voice echoed softly through the chamber. "They do not understand." The lead officer replied quietly, "Then we will teach them." The Erebus changed its course suddenly, releasing a shockwave that sent the nearest ships spinning out of control. But instead of destroying them, the human ship deactivated their engines, leaving them drifting safely. The humans didn't want to kill. They wanted to show that even mercy could be stronger than violence. The Council, however, didn't see it that way. They took the humans' restraint as weakness. The remaining ships regrouped and launched everything they had. 1,000 beams of energy streaked toward the Erebus, forming a wall of light so bright that even distant planets could see it. For a brief moment, space looked like it was on fire, and then, just like before, the light vanished into silence. The human warship had raised its full defense. A transparent field surrounded it, shimmering softly like ripples of water. Every attack simply dissolved upon contact. The Erebus glided forward slowly, gracefully, its weapons still quiet. It was not a battle, it was a lesson. Inside the Council's command center, fear turned into chaos. Officers shouted, systems failed, and ships collided as confusion spread. The commander's voice broke through the noise. "Retreat. All ships, retreat!" But it was too late. The humans had already jammed their communication networks. No one could hear the command. The fleet was trapped in silence. Then, for the first time, the Erebus fired. It wasn't a deadly weapon. It was a beam of energy that spread across space like a wave of light. Wherever it touched, the Council ships powered down. Engines stopped. Weapons froze. The entire fleet went dark. Within seconds, thousands of ships were motionless, floating like debris in the endless void. The battle was over before it truly began. Inside the Erebus, the humans watched in silence. No cheers, no celebration. The AI confirmed the result calmly. All enemy ships disabled. Minimal damage inflicted. The lead officer closed their eyes for a moment and said softly, "Let them live. They need to understand what they've done." The Erebus slowly turned away, leaving the frozen fleet behind. The Council's soldiers watched helplessly as the massive ship disappeared into the stars, its light fading into darkness. For the first time in their lives, they felt small, not because of size or power, but because they had faced something far greater than fear. They had faced truth. Hours later, when the Council finally regained communication, the surviving ship sent one message home. "We couldn't stop them. They didn't destroy us, they let us go." Those words spread quickly across every system. The galaxy was shocked. The humans had the power to wipe out the Council's entire force, yet they chose not to. That decision changed everything. Some called it mercy. Others called it arrogance. But deep down, everyone knew one thing. Humanity had returned, and they were not like anyone else. They fought differently, they thought differently, and they carried something no machine or empire could ever match. A heart that still remembered love, pain, and hope. Back inside the Erebus, the crew gathered quietly. The ship's lights dimmed and the stars outside stretched endlessly before them. The AI's voice broke the silence one last time. "They will come again." The lead officer looked out at the stars. "Then we'll be here," came the answer. No one knew what would happen next. The galaxy was watching, waiting for the next move. But the humans were in no hurry. They had waited thousands of years for this moment, and they could wait a little longer. As the Erebus drifted away, its engines humming softly, a single thought echoed among its crew. One simple truth that kept them strong through centuries of exile. Humanity had fallen once, but it would never fall again. And somewhere, far beyond the stars, the ghosts of Earth smiled, knowing their children had kept their promise. The battle for the stars was over. But the story of humanity's return had only just begun. The Erebus sailed through the silent sea of stars, far from the wreckage of the recent battle. The galaxy around it was quiet now, too quiet. The crew sat at their stations, the glow of blue screens reflecting off tired faces. They had won, yet none of them felt victory. The air inside the ship carried a strange mix of relief and sadness. They had proved their strength, but deep inside, everyone knew the war wasn't truly over. The Council's fleet had been defeated, yes, but not destroyed. The humans had chosen mercy, hoping it would speak louder than fire. Still, mercy didn't always bring peace. It could awaken fear or worse, pride. For a long moment, no one spoke. The Erebus drifted silently, letting the stars glide by like whispers of an ancient promise. Then the ship's AI spoke softly, its voice calm but thoughtful. "Transmission detected. It's a Council frequency." The crew looked up, surprised. One of them replied, "Patch it through." The main screen flickered, showing the face of a Council representative, not a soldier, but a leader. His tone was calm, almost too calm. "Human vessel," he said, "you have shown great power and restraint. The Council acknowledges your victory, but understand this, power without loyalty brings danger. The galaxy fears what it does not control." The human commander didn't respond immediately. He simply looked at the screen, his expression unreadable. Then quietly he said, "We didn't come to be controlled. We came to be remembered." The transmission cut off. Silence returned. Everyone in the control room understood what that message meant. The Council wasn't surrendering, and they were warning. There would be consequences. Humanity had stepped back into a galaxy that had already written them out of history. Now that history was being rewritten, and not everyone liked the new version. The AI analyzed the message. Probability of another attack, 79%, it reported. "They will not accept defeat easily." The commander gave a faint nod. "Then we keep moving. We need answers before the next storm begins." The Erebus set its course toward a forgotten region of space, a place once known as the Cradle Zone. It was there, according to ancient human data logs, that the Council had first discovered Earth thousands of years ago. If there were clues about why humanity had been erased from records, they would be there. As the ship glided closer, the stars grew dimmer, swallowed by thick cosmic dust. The sensors struggled to map the space ahead. The crew worked in silence, each person lost in thought. For many of them, this journey wasn't just about revenge or survival. It was about truth, about understanding what really happened to their ancestors. Hours passed. Then finally the AI spoke again. Approaching destination. "I am detecting debris fields of metallic fragments thousands of years old. The screen displayed the image. Broken structures floated in the darkness. Massive rings, shattered towers, and what looked like the remains of an ancient orbital city. It was beautiful in a haunting way. These ruins had once been alive, full of voices and lights. Now only silence remained. This was it, one crew member whispered. The place where it all began. The Erebus slowed its engines, moving carefully among the ruins. The scanners picked up faint energy signals buried deep inside the largest structure. The commander ordered a small team to investigate. Inside the ruins, everything felt frozen in time. The halls were filled with dust, the walls covered in strange alien writing. But beneath the layers of age, there were still signs of human design, old markings, faded emblems, and even a broken piece of what looked like an Earth flag. As the team moved deeper, they found something extraordinary, a sealed chamber still powered by a weak energy source. The AI helped decode the locks, and with a soft hum, the door opened. Inside the chamber floated a single metal sphere, glowing faintly with blue light. The humans recognized it instantly. It was a data core, ancient but still functional. It carried information from the time before the fall of Earth. They brought it back to the Erebus. Everyone gathered around as the AI began decoding the files. For a long moment, the screens flickered with static until finally an image appeared. A human face, old and tired, recorded centuries ago. "My name is Admiral Holt." The voice began. "If you are seeing this, it means humanity has survived beyond the ashes." The room fell completely silent. Every person stood frozen, listening. The recording continued. "The Galactic Council was never our ally. They feared us, and our creativity, our unpredictability. They wanted control, not peace. When we refused to submit, they declared humanity unstable. They called us a threat to balance. That was the reason they destroyed Earth. Not because of war, but because they were afraid." No one spoke. The truth felt heavy, almost too heavy to bear. The voice went on, weaker now. "But we were not gone. We built ships, we hid, we waited. We believed one day our children would return to finish what we could not. Not to destroy, but to remind the stars who we truly are." The recording faded out. For a moment, the control room was silent. Then the commander stood, his voice steady. "Now we know why they fear us. They fear the truth." The AI confirmed. "The Council has rewritten all archives. According to their public records, humanity never existed." The word struck deep. A whole civilization erased like it never mattered. But that was about to change. The crew decided their next move. They would send a signal across the galaxy. Not an attack, not a threat, but a message of truth. A message that would expose everything the Council had hidden for thousands of years. It wasn't an easy decision. Doing this would make them the target of every fleet, every spy, every weapon in the galaxy. But humanity had stayed silent long enough. The Erebus's communication systems powered up. The crew prepared the transmission. The AI combined the old data from the Admiral's message with new visual footage from the battle, showing the human ship's strength, but also its mercy. The commander looked at the glowing screen. "Send it," he said. Across the galaxy, thousands of worlds received the signal. People who had never even heard of humans watched in shock as the message played. They saw the truth, that the Council had lied, that a powerful, peaceful species had been erased to maintain control. For the first time, cracks began to appear in the Council's perfect image. Civilizations that had once followed them blindly began to ask questions. The message spread faster than anyone could stop it. The Council tried to shut down the transmission, but it was too late. The truth was already out there, carried through the stars like wildfire. On the Erebus, the crew watched the broadcast reach faraway systems. Some smiled. Others cried quietly. After thousands of years, humanity's voice had returned to the galaxy, not as a conqueror, but as a reminder. But the moment of peace didn't last long. The AI detected multiple fleets moving toward them. "Incoming vessels, Council response. Estimated time of arrival, 2 hours. The humans exchanged calm looks. They had expected this. They knew the Council would try to silence them again, but this time the whole galaxy was watching. The commander stood tall. "Let them come," he said quietly. "We're not hiding anymore." The crew prepared for battle again, but this time it wasn't just about defense. It was about standing for truth. Every person on board felt it deep inside. They weren't just fighting for Earth's memory now. They were fighting for the right of every forgotten race to exist without fear. Outside, the stars glimmered brighter as if they were watching too. The Erebus adjusted its course toward the incoming fleets. The engines roared to life, and the ship cut through the darkness like a blade of light. The galaxy was no longer silent. The message of truth was echoing across every planet, every colony, every outpost. The Council's control was cracking, and they knew it. For the first time in history, the powerful were afraid, and not of weapons, but of truth. Inside the human ship, the commander looked out at the stars and whispered softly, "This is what they feared all along, that we would speak." The AI responded quietly, "And now the galaxy is listening." The Erebus continued forward, glowing brighter against the endless night. A single ship carrying the voice of a lost world, a world that refused to stay silent any longer. The stars shimmered like silent witnesses to humanity's return, and the universe, for the first time in a very long while, began to remember. The stars burned brighter that night. The Erebus glided through the black silence of space, heading straight toward the heart of the Galactic Council's territory. Behind it stretched a trail of fading light, not just from its engines, but from its message. Across the galaxy, millions had heard humanity's voice. Some were afraid, some were inspired, and some began to question everything they'd been taught. Inside the Council's command world, chaos ruled. Leaders shouted at one another, blaming, denying, panicking. The truth had spread too far and too fast. Entire planets demanded answers. Old allies refused orders. The Council's control, once unshakable, was slipping away like sand through their fingers. "Find that ship," one of them shouted. "Destroy it before more see their message." But even as they prepared their largest fleets deep down, a silent fear grew among them. The humans had done what no one else ever dared. They had spoken truth into a world built on lies, out. In the cold stretch of deep space, the Erebus was already waiting. The crew stood ready at their posts, calm but aware of what was coming. The AI's voice echoed softly through the bridge. Enemy fleets approaching from 3 directions. Estimated arrival, 20 minutes. The commander nodded. "Then this is it," he said quietly. There was no anger in his tone, only peace. They all knew what this moment meant. It wasn't just another battle. It was the final stand. If they fell here, at least the truth would live on. The signal they had sent could never be erased. The AI dimmed the light slightly as the ship's system shifted into battle mode. The hum of the engines deepened, like a heartbeat preparing for something greater. The crew members looked around the room, their faces calm, almost serene. They had come so far, carrying the memory of an entire world that no longer existed, and now they would protect that memory with everything they had. Outside, in the blackness of space, the enemy arrived. Thousands of ships, each glowing with red and silver light. Their weapons pointed forward, forming an ocean of firepower. The sight was overwhelming, even for those who had seen war before. The AI scanned them carefully. Council fleet composition, over 8,000 vessels, heavy armaments detected. One of the crew whispered, "We're outnumbered again." The commander smiled faintly. "We always were." The Erebus turned slowly to face them. It was one ship against an empire, but that single ship carried the will of an entire species that refused to die. The Council's command fleet sent a final transmission. "Human vessel, surrender now. The Council will show mercy." The reply came softly. "You've already had your mercy, when we let you live." That was the last thing the Council heard before the first wave began. Thousands of energy beams fired at once, streaking through the darkness. The Erebus disappeared behind a wall of light. Explosions flashed across the stars, shaking the space around them. The crew held their breath as alarms echoed through the ship. But then, the light cleared. The Erebus was still there. Its shields glowed faintly like ripples of blue water, shimmering but unbroken. Inside, the crew worked in perfect harmony. Commands were short, movements precise. The AI processed millions of calculations every second, adjusting energy flows, predicting enemy movements, and guiding their counterattacks. But the humans, they were the soul of it all. With every decision, every breath, they showed something no machine or empire could replicate: intuition, courage, and hope. The Erebus retaliated. Its main cannon roared to life, releasing a wave of light so bright it split through the darkness like sunrise over a dead world. The energy beam didn't destroy the Council ships. It disabled them, turning their power against them. One by one, ships fell silent, drifting helplessly. But still, more came. The Council had sent everything, their finest fleets, their oldest weapons, their most loyal soldiers. The sky was filled with fire and shadows. Hours passed, and the battle turned into a storm. The Erebus fought like a living being, every move graceful and precise. It wasn't just technology. It was the spirit of survival itself. But even the strongest heart could be tested. The Erebus began to take damage. Sparks flashed across the control room. Panels flickered. The AI's voice trembled for the first time. Shields at 30%. Structural integrity dropping. The commander gripped the edge of the console. "Keep going," he said quietly. They could hear the ship creaking, almost as if it was alive, struggling, refusing to give up. The crew worked faster, voices rising and falling in rhythm with the battle. Outside, explosions bloomed like dying stars. The Erebus's engines blazed with golden fire, pushing the ship forward through the chaos. It weaved between burning wrecks and broken fleets, unstoppable. Finally, it reached the center, the Council's flagship. The massive vessel floated like a dark mountain, covered in silver armor. Its weapons turned toward the human ship, ready to end it all. The commander looked at the screen. "This is where it ends," he said softly. The AI paused. "Recommend final protocol activation?" He hesitated, then nodded. "Do it." The Erebus's lights shifted. A deep hum filled the air. The AI spoke one last time, not in its usual calm tone, but with something that sounded almost like emotion. "It has been an honor." A pulse of golden light expanded from the ship, spreading outward like a heartbeat. It wasn't a weapon of destruction, but of power. Every system within 1,000 kilometers shut down, including the enemy's. The Council's flagship went dark. Its weapons froze, its engines silent. The Erebus floated quietly among the ruins of silence, its own lights flickering. The commander stood up slowly. The crew around him looked exhausted, their faces pale but calm. They had done it. The Council's greatest fleet was finished, but the Erebus was badly damaged. Systems were failing one by one. The AI's voice grew weaker. Core power, at minimal levels. Life support unstable. The commander placed his hand on the control panel. "You did well," he said softly. Outside the window, the stars were starting to fade. The ship's hull cracked under the pressure of space. Yet even then there was no fear, only peace. They had done what they came for. They had told the truth, and they had survived long enough for the galaxy to hear it. The AI's voice trembled. "Transmission log indicates millions of responses from allied systems. The truth is spreading." The commander smiled faintly. "Then humanity lives on." Moments later, the Erebus sent one final signal, a burst of light carrying the full truth of everything it had seen and done. It spread across the stars, unstoppable. Then the ship went silent. The Erebus drifted slowly, its once bright engines now dark. But its story didn't end there. Weeks later, across dozens of worlds, people began speaking of what they had seen. The message from the human ship had changed everything. Civilizations that once feared the Council began to rise against its lies. Planets that had never known freedom started demanding it. And in the quiet places between stars, whispers spread. Whispers of a ship that had stood alone and faced an empire. Some said it was gone forever. Others believed it still drifted somewhere in the void, watching, waiting. The Council's power began to crumble. Without lies to hide behind, their unity broke apart. The galaxy began to change, and through it, all one truth remained. Humanity had returned, and their message could never be silenced again. Many generations later, explorers from distant worlds found something floating at the edge of a dying star. It was ancient, scarred, and silent. The Erebus. They brought it aboard their station, and when they powered it, a soft voice filled the air. This is the warship Erebus, guardian of a lost world. We are humanity. We never disappeared. We became the stars. The explorers stood in awe. They realized this wasn't just a machine. It was a piece of history, a reminder that truth can survive even the darkest of ages. The ship's story spread once again, carried by new voices, new people, and new worlds. Humanity had long vanished physically, but their legacy, their courage, their heart, had become eternal. And somewhere beyond the edge of the known universe, where light fades into mystery, a faint golden glow could still be seen, the last heartbeat of a ship that refused to surrender. The Erebus had fulfilled its purpose. Humanity had won, not by destroying but by being remembered. The galaxy, once ruled by fear, now whispered their name with respect. And the stars, silent witnesses to everything, seemed to shine a little brighter, as if honoring the promise humanity had made long ago. We will return, we will be free, and we will never be forgotten.